Afternoon, everybody. Not yet. Okay. Hi, afternoon, everybody. Thank you for spending your Saturday afternoon with us on this webinar. Today, you'll learn insights on how parenting and its expectations need to change in this digital age, and why it's important to teach our kids good digital literacy habits from a young age for their safety, and very importantly, how they can do so through play. I'm Walter. I'm a member of the Media Literacy Council, and I'm also the Chief Content Strategist of Cooler Insights. Cooler Insights is a digital marketing agency. I will be your host and moderator for today's webinar. Now, we're in for a treat today because we have two experts in the business of digital literacy and play, merging the both together. First, we have Professor Lim Sun Sun, the Professor of Communication and Technology at the Singapore University of Technology and Design. She's also a member of the Media Literacy Council, and she has done quite a fair amount of research in the area of digital literacy. So we're going to learn quite a bit from her. We also have Mr. Dieter Carstensen, who's the head of digital child safety from the Lego group. Okay, I don't know how many of you are fans of Lego. I've been a fan of Lego since young, and even my kid, who is a 17-year-old, he also has been playing Lego from young until now. So what we're going to do today is we're going to learn how, even with the advent of the internet and mobile devices being an inextricable part of our lives, now we have a home-based learning, we have work from home, we're probably spending our time playing from our digital devices as well. How can we balance between all the different tensions when it comes to plug-in parenting? All right, are there things that we need to take note of for our kids? How do we teach them digital literacy habits? We can be abstract, especially if we have young children at home. Now, I'm a father to a teenager myself. As I mentioned, he's a 17-year-old, and sometimes I do wonder how much leeway should I give him, and how much should I exert my parenting style. Thankfully, I'm here just like you to learn from our two experts. First, we have Professor Lim. Prof Lim will share how parenting will become more hands-on, or rather switch on in this day and age, and how we as parents need to adapt accordingly from traditional notions of parenting. She will be followed by Mr. Carstensen, who will provide insights on how using play can be an effective method to teach your child creativity and digital literacy. Following that, we'll have enough time to do a live Q&A. We'll love to hear what questions you have for us. And my role as a moderator is to try to send as many of them as possible, given the limited time we have to our two distinguished panelists. If you're unfamiliar with Zoom, take note that there is a chat button or function, or you can just press alternate H for the chat window to appear. And when you send your questions, just send it to everyone in the chat so that our crew can take note of it as well. We will try our best to allow all the questions to be read during the Q&A session. All right. Right now, I think it will be time for us to invite our first speaker and my fellow MLC member, Professor Lim Sun Sun, to deliver her presentation. Prof Lim will be speaking on the 3 T's in technology and play. Over to you, Sun Sun.
Thank you, Walter. Hi there, very good afternoon to everyone, and welcome to this afternoon's event. It's my pleasure today to speak on the 3 T's in technology and play. And I think this is an especially timely period to talk about this because holidays have begun, the year-end holidays have begun, and your children, like it or not, will be playing with devices for a fair bit of time as well. And I know many of you have questions as to how to strike a balance between how much time to give them when they're playing on their devices, and also how much outdoor time you want to, counter that with. So in the first instance, the ones of you who are not needing your afternoon coffee will be able to tell me there are no three T's in technology and play, right? There's only one. But in fact, I will highlight to you three T's that are especially important in terms of helping your children to use devices for play. And these are three rather critical T's, and I'll walk through some best practices, if you will, in the time that I've been given to me. And the three T's are technology, tone, and trust. So let me just begin with the first T, which is technology. Now, in the first instance, I know that many of you are parents of children who are in preschool all the way up to primary school, and that many of you are just, getting warmed up to the whole idea of parenting. And what's important to know is that as your child grows, their technology needs will change, and that it's also important that you keep abreast of these changing technology needs, as well as what kinds of different potentials and pitfalls they can encounter as they start to use different kinds of technology. So with the preschoolers who are using maybe more tablet devices, those have one set of opportunities and challenges. And then as they grow older into primary school, they become more independent. They will be able to navigate these environments on their own. And so that's when you also need to think about how well you can enable their discovery and how well you can protect them from whatever harms you feel exist on the internet. Now, that's why it is important as parents to know our technology. And I know it can feel quite exhausting because it seems as if the technology is constantly evolving, and it seems as if you always have to play catch up. Unfortunately, in the same way that, with parenting, as your child grows, you find that you've got to equip yourself with new skills, with new understanding of your children as they mature. It's the same way with technology as well. You also have to keep up with how your children are maturing and how their growing skills will give them different needs with regard to technology use. So once you recognize that this is an important part of parenting today, given that our children live in very media-rich environments, that's when you can think about how you want to strategically empower yourself to be able to help your children and guide them in their technology use. And that's where the one very comforting thing I can say to you is that you are certainly not alone in this endeavor. Every parent out there is also similarly struggling. I have two teenagers. I'm a professor of communication and technology. I also struggle with all of the different technologies that are out there that I have to keep up with. But know that you are not alone, because there are very many academics like me doing research on this topic. There are also many government and non-government organizations that are providing support with all kinds of tips and advice. And that's where at the end of the session, you will see the Media Literacy Council QR code, which will allow you to link to the resources that our Media Literacy Council website has with regard to the many questions that you have about technology use. Now, besides all of these agencies, there are also your immediate social network, your friends, other parents whose children are the same age as yours, as well as media outlets which provide a great deal of information. So it's good to curate for yourself a list of the different kinds of media sources out there that inform you and that you find have information that you can relate well to, that you find accessible and comprehensible. So for example, I have many friends who follow parenting blogs because those blogs are written by parents whose children are of similar age to theirs, and the bloggers provide some very practical advice as to how they can guide their children's media use. The bloggers will also do things like review technology products for children, and that provides you with a great deal of guidance that you can actually start to acquire with regard to with regard to how to guide your children's technology use. Now, another way to learn about technology is also to use it with your child. And this is really important because it creates a common language with your child, and it helps you to create a bond with your child so that you can actually connect with each other, and you can speak to each other about all kinds of things. And this enhances your relationship as well. Now, obviously, when it comes to talking about technology, I think as parents, very often we might feel a little bit protective of our children, and we might think, oh no, I need to shield them from all kinds of adverse influence. Now, on the one hand, while it's important for you to do that, it's also important for you to use the right tone. You don't want to be too authoritarian, where, I know best, you must listen to me. What you should do is to be authoritative, which is to say, I'm your parents, I am older, I do understand the world much better, and I have looked up these sources, and they have advised me that the technology is potentially risky in these ways. Now, when you use the authoritative tone, I think your children will be much more responsive to you than if you were highly authoritarian. And it's also important that you explain and discuss your rules, because children actually are far more intelligent and sensible than we often give them credit for. And if you're able to explain and rationalize to them why you have particular kinds of rules and set particular guidelines around their technology use, they may actually be much more receptive as well. The most important thing is do not be judgmental, because once you're authoritarian and you're very judgmental, like, oh, that's bad for you, you really shouldn't be doing this, and so on. Once you do use that judgmental tone, you will find that your children will tune out very, very quickly. And that's something that you wish to avoid at all costs. So it's important for you to mind your tone when you are talking to your children about technology and media. As far as possible, just maintain a genuine curiosity about what it is they're doing, and get them to tell you and share with you so that you can build that relationship. And this is really important with regard to my next point, which is to build that trust. Just as your parenting journey is going to be a long one, the technology guidance journey is also going to be as long as the parenting journey, right? And so it's very important that you build that trust with your children. Now, what happens with children is that it's imperative that they know that your first course of action when it comes to their technology use is not to take the device away or to confiscate it if they've done something that is less than wise. And the important thing is that when you think about children today, technology actually plays an important role in terms of their social networks, in terms of their relationship building with their friends. And so you don't want to have your children think that, oh, the moment they've got an issue with technology, that when they come to you with it, that you're going to confiscate the device, because once they have that fear, they will never turn to you for advice. They will never come and ask you, why is it that someone in my Facebook or in my Snapchat or Instagram said something very harsh about someone from another group, and why is it that when people say a particular thing, other people condemn them, and so on. And these are all very genuine questions that your children will encounter when they see all kinds of content on the internet that may be confusing, that may run counter to the kinds of ideals that you have shared with them. And so it's important that they have that safe port of call, which is you, to turn to whenever they are confused, and whenever they feel any kind of fear or anxiety or concern. So once you build that trust relationship, your children know that you are able to provide them with sound guidance and advice. And so that trust relationship is something that you really need to foster. Now, for some parents, you might feel that, oh, I'm so busy, I have such long hours at work, I totally don't have time to sit with my child and use the technology with them, and so on. And yet, I'm concerned that they might be exposed to adverse influence. In which case, as a parent, if you feel like you want to impose technological features like screen time limits or content filters that alert you if your children are looking at particular kinds of content, by all means, do explore these technological possibilities that can help to support you. But I highly, highly recommend, unequivocally, I recommend that you speak to your child and you let them know that you are using these content filters and screen time limits. Do not use them in a way that is you know, under the table, that's not open. Be open and transparent with your child as to why it is that you are using these filters, and you'll explain to them that you're essentially using them because you are trying to help guide them along and provide them with a helping hand. So building that trust relationship is really vital if you think about how long your parenting journey is going to be and how the technology is going to constantly evolve. So whatever it is, make sure that the channels of communication between you and your children are constantly open, because again, once they feel that you are overly judgmental, or once they feel that you're going to take the extreme action of confiscating their devices, the likelihood of them turning to you for support and advice will actually reduce. So those are the three T's that I'm talking about, but I will give you a bonus fourth T, and that is tensions, which is that ultimately, because media devices constitute such a large part of our children's lives, and because sometimes your children might do certain things with technology that you disagree with, you will find that tensions will crop up. And be mentally prepared for these kinds of tensions. And that's why the earlier three T's are so important, because once you know the technology and you know how the technology has particular implications for your children's influence on your behavior, or children influence on your children's behavior, and once you also understand how the tone with which you speak to your children can also influence your relationship, and once you know that you've got to build that trust, you will actually be able to pave the way for easing these tensions that will invariably crop up. And all kinds of tensions could occur, right? It could be a case of your children using technology too much. It could be a case of your children doing something over the internet that breach their privacy and the family's privacy. It could be a case of, let's say, your children using some kind of online communication platform where they inadvertently or even, you know, deliberately sought to offend someone. And these are all very common incidents that will occur as children are maturing and as they are negotiating these new technological platforms. So as parents, it's important for you to build that relationship so that you can work through these tensions in the best way possible. And one important thing that I want to leave you with is role modeling, which is that very often we ourselves as parents aren't exactly paragons of virtue when it comes to technology use. We may hang on our devices for too long. We may use our devices in certain ways that, you know, are less than desirable. And so that's where it's important that you remember that your children are watching you and watching what you're doing, and they are mimicking your behavior. So if you are not yourself the best role model, if you are yourself, you know, overly fixated on your devices, if you are yourself overly concerned about the response to your social media posts and so on, your children will find it very difficult for you to listen to you when you try to give advice about those similar situations. So absolutely remember that, you know, not just in technology and parenting, but in all aspects of parenting, role modeling is something that's quite vital. So I think those are the key messages that I will share for today in the time given. And if you are interested in my research, do look up my website, sunsunlim.com. You will find many of my opinion editorials and commentaries on this topic that you may find helpful. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Sun Sun. I think that was really interesting, and I've learned quite a bit too. You know, the three T's or the four T's, technology, make sure that we know what our kids are into. I've seen a couple of parents doing TikTok with their children as well. So that is a good way to kind of use it in a positive manner. Tone is also very important, and so is trust and tensions. And I think that inevitably there will be tensions in our role as parents. I think the question is, how do we juggle between being authoritative? Well, no, we should be more authoritative and not authoritarian. Yeah, I love the reminder on role modeling. We all need that reminder. I need that reminder because being a digital marketer, I'm online quite a bit of the time as well. So it's something that we need to juggle and balance. Since we are on the subject of play for digital literacy, I'd like to invite Mr. Dieter Carstensen, Head of Digital Child Safety at the Lego Group, to share more on what we as parents usually struggle with. How do we continue to capture our children's imagination and attention while teaching them useful skills like digital literacy? Dieter, over to you.
Thank you, Walter, and thank you for a very inspiring talk, Dr. Lim. I think I've noted down 8 things that I need to improve on and that I need to take further. So I guess I need to do this now. But before I do that, I think I'm going to share a couple of findings and approaches that we have worked with here at the Lego Group. So thank you very much for attending today's webinar. And I'm calling in from Denmark in Europe. It's cold outside, not as you in the afternoon on a Saturday afternoon, but just a couple of words around the Lego Group where I work. We are a family-owned Danish company. We are in 130 countries selling our products. We are almost reaching a milestone of being 100 years old. So we were founded in 1932. And for the moment, we have around 19,000 colleagues around the world that are both working with producing the Lego bricks, digital experiences, but also like me, talking about how we introduce policies internally in the company. An important thing for us, at least, is not really whether we are successful selling our products. That is, of course, the foundation of what we need to do. But we are voted as the #1 most reputable brand in the world. And I think that is a testimony to our effort that we try to do a lot of good things at the same time of selling some really great products. And as Walter mentioned in the beginning, he has a teenage son that still plays with Lego. I have a teenage son that plays a bit less with Lego, but they're still big fans. We are in the Lego Group here to inspire and develop the builders of tomorrow. That really needs to be felt in everything we do around our products and experiences. We are here to basically serve children and help them grow into a better, competent human being. And we want to do this by giving them a set of skills, but also by using play as the language that we are interpreting or communicating with them, but allowing them also to learn these different skills. So in terms of skills, what we're talking about is primarily the 21st century skills around the emotional connection between themselves as an individual, but also with others, the cognitive skills, the physical, social, and the creative skills. So these are the classic skills that you would be acquiring when you are playing and what we're trying to learn. If you're looking at the things that you would learn from a digital play moment, then it's a lot about information and data literacy. What is right, what is wrong? So criticism, source criticism into the different things that goes on, but also the communication with others, how you collaborate with others. But you also learn about how to create content and become entrepreneurs and basically make use of technology. You also learn about your safety, how to put in the settings in the right way. And then you learn to solve problems. So these are the sort of the key components that we would look at when we develop new digital experiences where children they would engage. What can they learn from these kind of experiences? How can we play a part in facilitating this kind of learning? And an interesting stat, I think it may be a bit less, a bit more, depending on where you are coming from, but remarkable, 65% of the kindergarten children today, their job have not yet been created. So we don't really know exactly that you need to be a bank teller or an accountant or a cook or a chef. These kind of things, they are not predictable anymore. So you need to be open, and these kind of skills, the 21st century skills, will allow you to sort of be a bit more approachable to the new market spaces and job opportunities that comes in the future. We hope play is going to be the language you're going to be using to acquire those kind of skills. The Lego Group, just the final slide on this, we basically came from developing wooden toys back in 1932 over the Lego brick in 58, minifigures, robotics in 98, into expanding our digital portfolio. So Lego is actually a combination of 2 words, which is basically like gods, which means play well. So the whole ethos of what we're doing is play. It's play-based experiences. We want play to be what you're doing when you see a Lego product. We don't consider ourselves a toy manufacturer. It's a play or a play experience developer. So that is really what we're trying to do here. Our approach to responsible digital engagement with children encompasses a lot of different areas. One of them is, of course, digital parenting, which is what we're talking about here today, but it also talks about parents' involvement in general and how they can step up and lean in and be part and a value to their child's engagement when they go online. We see the Lego Group having a fantastic role and opportunity to help these dialogues happening, facilitate the way where a parent can exercise their skills, but also their role as a parent together with their child, building up the different settings that needs to be put in place for their child to really flourish and embrace technology and the digital experiences to its full potential. Everything we do is based on UNICEF's works on children's rights. So the Convention of the Rights of the Child was ratified or adopted by the United Nations in 1998. Talks around a lot of these elements here about protection, privacy, recreation, and all these rights the children they should be exercising. And literally, we believe that children's rights are the same offline and online. There may be different rules to how you treat children online, how you get around them online, but in essence, the rights are the same. We need to maximize the benefits, so children's benefit from the online environment, whilst at the same time minimizing the risks, just as you do when you're offline. We have a lot of digital experiences where we try to exercise this by design. We go in and create the safety, so the safe environments, so children they can sort of hover around. And I'm sorry, I'm just getting noises on my screen. They can hover around inside the digital experiences to be able to get access to creativity spaces or social spaces or other places where they can sort of hang out and meet other people and so forth. What we've done is basically we've created a character called the it's called Captain Safety, and this Captain Safety is introduced into our digital experiences as a non-playable character. So a character that is driven by us. He comes up with messages to the child, so he appears to be a friend to the child inside these experiences, and it will come up and give you guidance to the different parts that are necessary for you to learn around. Before they get into the actual game, there is a moment where parents they can play a role. So in the Lego experiences, we are going to ask the parent to be part of setting up the accounts for children. And this is actually a fantastic moment where the child wants to get into a specific experience. The parent is a gatekeeper for accessing that kind of experience. And as Professor Lim was talking about earlier, it is really where you need to exercise this conversation. You need to engage with your child and lean in, say, fine, what is it that you would like to do? How do you want to do it? What kind of place do you want to go to? And then the parent will try to understand what is the right context for their child. Every family is individual and different from anybody else. Nobody can say that one rule works for everybody. It's really not that way it works. Every child, even at the same age, will be at different stages of evolution and capabilities. So you need to assess it child by child. That is really how detailed it needs to be put into place. Because if you want to put limitations on what your child can do, then that is of course your choice. But I think what we're trying to get at here today is that if you are willing to invest in your child and you're willing to take risks and chances with your child of actually learning where the edges are and then bring them in there and then together be there when need is called for, then you will actually help your child much more than just saying fine to a yes and no, don't go there and don't do that. So I think it's important that we understand, and also from a company perspective, we provide you as a parent with the tools and options to really narrow down what makes sense for you. Just to show very quickly a couple of things that happens inside the Lego Life app, as I mentioned before. And before the child actually starts engaging inside the app, we want to give them the best introduction in a fun and playful way, simple, not intrusive, not dictating the negative sides of what you cannot do, don't do this and whatever. What we want to do is basically we want to tell the child what good looks like. What is the best version of you? How can you be a safe, a fun, a respectful player inside this community that you're entering in? So by changing the tone of voice from being negative on the risk base and looking at the opportunity and see how you can be much better, much bigger, grown up, then I think that actually instills a sort of a willingness and an eager in the child to move from being, okay, I need to be careful to actually be able to how I can influence. And I think there's a big inspiration also to be seen by some of the youth activism that happens around the world. Children, they want to impact their own world. They want to be able to say, this is the way I need my world to be because this is fit for my purpose and fit for my sort of for my being. We as a parent should actually just encourage this to happen even more, and we can do this by guiding them around the edges and then make them understand what are maybe the parameters they need to be within, so that they don't fall into traps of unwanted situations and content and so forth. Another thing is really, again, when you are inside situations, and this can relate also to offline situations, right? So when the child inside our app wants to share things or wants to be friends with somebody or wants to comment on things, then we are trying to give them advice that is really not negative, but actually telling them, just stop and think twice, reflect about what you're trying to do, and that would help. You hope, at least, it would help the child to sort of contextualize what they're trying to do and put the, let's say, the effect of their actions into sort of perspective, so that they can learn before they actually do the things. Try not to share things that could hurt others or harm others, or comments that could be nice and respectful and so forth. So that kind of advice, small tokens, small issues all the time, when they make sense, is really the more important, instead of giving them a set of rules when they start off any kind of experience, because they will forget them. They'll be engulfed into the activity that they're playing with, and they would not really remember what their parent told them 5 minutes ago. At least that's what I'm learning from my own kids back home here. It may be the same for you. Maybe you're luckier than I am. So actually, in July earlier this year, we figured out that we needed to do a bit more, or at least we could do a lot more for parents. Instead of, now we've addressed children inside the apps, but parents, they were still feeling, okay, how can we help them? What is the right way for us? And what could be a Lego way of helping a parent to start a conversation with their child around online risks throughout the childhood and so forth. And just to mention here, I think there's been a lot of comments around whether we can share the PowerPoints and so forth. I'm happy to make that available, but you can also go online and find the resources that I'm talking about now. They will be online and free for downloads. So meet the monsters. We have two sets of monsters. We have those that we call the online explorers, and they are connected with things kids love about being online. So one is loving the message and video call friends online, which is, of course, with the pandemic, increasing rapidly or massively. And then we have the multiplayer who loves online gaming. And that, again, is something that we see a lot of kids, they play, girls and boys, there's no difference really. They like to play, they like to role play, they like to play action games and whatever. So you can maybe see there's a difference between what kind of play they want to do, more social or more competitive games, but they both like to play, and play, is fine, it's great. And then, of course, we have the giggler who loves watching and making videos online. TikTok was mentioned before, as it's a great tool for parents and kids to do things together. So the giggler here is basically just outlining what kind of areas we need to be careful around when we are having these kind of approaches or topics. The watch out is then talking about the actual risks that we have been identifying to be the one that we believe parents are very concerned around. We have one around safe sharing and privacy. So specifically, now we mentioned the video service before. If you are starting to share images or other kinds of information around you and so forth, then it's good to understand how much is enough and where you should stop sharing more. So it's important to find a balance of needing to be recognizable without being identifiable. And I think that's the difference around what we can or should be sharing inside. The meanie online bullying and trolling, specifically when you are on the online environment, you will find that discussions between people, they tend to maybe overstep some of the logical progression, where you are in disagreement, then you start to argue, then you may start fighting, and then you start actually becoming abusive and start threatening. When you're online, that sort of scale or ladder that happens step by step makes jumps. So from actually being in disagreement around something, you may start actually threatening straight away. We see this on in different scenarios from different companies that we talk to, that it is actually it is quite prevalent in children's digital environments, and it goes for girls as for boys. There's no difference here. Um, so the third one is about phishing and online scams. Children, they would look at different things. If it's flashy and so forth, they may click on it and they may look at an offer. Okay, you can get this for free and so forth, but nothing is for free online. So if they say that's for free, then you should probably consider yourself being the product. Something is collecting data from you or doing something for you. So you need to be careful around this. And it's good for kids to be understanding at an early age that certain things needs to be sort of evaluated a couple of times before you actually start clicking on them. In-game purchases, the coin guzzler. It's all around understanding that if you purchase something online, then it has, in most cases, an effect on your physical, real life money. And if children, they are not really cued into understanding that, yes, when I pay for this virtual sword or trousers or hat or whatever it may be, then that actually costs money for me and my family. So we need to have those kind of talks to make them understand that it may be okay for you and your family. It all depends on who you are and what you're okay and comfortable with, but it may be okay for you that your child spends money online. Then maybe understand with the child how much is much, and maybe understand also from the game or the experience itself, what are you able to buy in there, and what is a good deal, what is nice and what is correct, and maybe what is not really for you to buy. So be understandable around these issues here, and maybe also set rules for what is right for you and your family. Strangers online, it's a lot about don't only talk about people or talk with people that you don't know. Be careful around it, but not necessarily, not all strangers are bad people. It is about understanding who other people are. And the last one, I think, is a very critical one for a lot of people here today, screen time. Just want to say two things, and we can come back to this a bit later. Screen time is not necessarily bad time. Bad time is when you don't use it or you overuse it too much and overexpose and don't get physical activity. So a nice healthy diet is really what we're looking for to as a parent to come around with. I have 1 minute, so I'm just going to go straight to this one here. I think what we are trying to say, we did something for World Children's Day and World Kindness Day and Anti-Bullying Week, which was a week ago. Learning through play, and if you do that, it is basically having conversations with your child, building something together, do something together. Then you're able to get a joyful experience that helps the child find meaning in what they do. They connect with you as a parent. They will feel comfortable exploring the world as it is, and it gives you as a parent a role to stay active, stay relevant, and stay connected to your child when they're online. So I'll stop here, and hopefully we can get back to some of the questions in a second. Thank you.
Um, Thank you so much, Dieter, for helping us understand how play can be a powerful way to engage our kids. I love the idea of Captain Safety as a character, and the monsters, you actually use different personas to reflect how we become whenever we are behind the screen. And instead of just communicating very literally, these personas may help to make it more real, especially to a young child who may be able to connect directly with a character. So it is really a good way to use play in a positive manner rather than just to try and ram a certain message down their heads. It makes it more easy for the child to visualize. So great work by Lego. So we've seen quite a bit of questions coming in for both our speakers. And we also have quite a few that were submitted prior to the webinar. So do feel free to keep the questions coming in. You can just use the chat window, and there are also instructions on how to do so. My colleague has just flashed it on the screen. Okay, don't be shy. Okay, try whatever burning questions that you have, just send it to the chat window. Now, just to kick things off, let's take a quick poll now. The poll is this: do you find it easy to teach your child how to be safe and responsible online? Now, simply respond yes, no, or not sure. I'll just give you maybe about a minute or two just to submit your answers. So we have, looking at the chart now, it seems like there's more who are having some issues trying to teach the child how to be safe. About 56% of you have answered that you find it challenging or difficult to teach your child how to be safe and responsible online. Another 19% says that you're not sure, while 26% of you says, yes, you find it easy to teach your child how to be safe and responsible online. Well, I guess that's why we have this session today. It's specifically to cater to your needs. So maybe I'll start to ask our panelists, beginning with Dieter. According to our attendees, about 56% find it a challenge to teach their child how to be safe and responsible. How can a play-based activity like Build and Talk from Lego help to enhance this?
I can just start off with saying, I think I'm part of the 56%. Although I've been working with this topic for over 20 years and my kids are, getting older and out of the age where they actually want to listen to their parents, I think the topic is ever so relevant, and parenting in general is not an easy feast for anybody. So communicating with your child, I think, is a lot about facilitating the discussion in the right environment where they actually feel comfortable of opening up and receptive to whatever you want to tell them. Because if you can't connect and create this space where dialogue can happen and they want to listen to you, then I think you're never going to achieve whatever you're setting off to do. And I think what Professor Sun Sun Lim was mentioning before is really, you need to connect with kids. And I think the 3Ts are fantastic. And as I mentioned, I've made a lot of points for my own sort of education to go forward. But the point for me is really, you need to find something, and the play-based activities that we have identified being the way that we want to approach it facilitates between a parent. It gives them the tool to open up those kind of conversations. It gives them a language by which the child feel comfortable, because children, they play much better than adults we do. We forget how to play right, or in most of the times, we don't have the imagination that the kids they do. So when you build these kind of monsters or whatever you want to build, it could be a giraffe or just 4 bricks on top of each other, whatever you build, as long as there's something in front of you that helps the child get that kind of in attention on something, then you feel connected. You're connected through play, and that opens up for anything you want to talk about, I believe. So this is why we're doing it, and play is really the language we want to use to facilitate a dialogue that then helps educate.
Thank you. Sun Sun, do you have anything to add to that?
Yes, I completely agree with what Dieter said about the importance of building the relationship through play. But I can also hear many parents saying, I don't have time, to play with my kids, right? But even then, through the use of technology, there are various ways in which to create shared moments that can, help to facilitate those points of connection. So very many families I know now actually have family WhatsApp chat groups. And in the course of the day, the parents might come across a funny meme that they saw, or they might, the kids might have seen an interesting thing that they encountered on their way to school and taken a picture to share with their parents. And the family chat then becomes that kind of family water cooler that everyone, shares a point of connection. And then when you get home together, whether it's dinner or whatever, you realize, you have something to pick up where you left off and say, oh, wasn't that a funny thing that, you shared to the family chat today? And even if you don't have so much time to meet each other, to have these online points of connection can help to lubricate the relationship here and there. With regard to play, it is a time and an investment. To have to gazette time and figure out how to play the game and so on. But I will say that it pays very huge dividends, in the sense that every time you talk to your kids, you can always draw on those shared moments, and then you can laugh about some of the things that you did together in play, and those are really, really precious.
Thank you so much, Sun Sun. Our next question is a very popular one. I always see it. What is the appropriate age for children to own a handphone, tablet, or other digital device? And I guess the related question would be, what is the recommended amount of screen time for our kids? For this question, of course, I will have to ask Sun Sun to help us with appropriate answers. And Dieter, feel free to add in after that.
Sure. Thank you for that question. Indeed, it is always a burning question. And I would say that I'll focus my answer on the smartphone because I think that tends to be the device that is most personally owned and personally used, that parents fret the most about. Very often, parents are disappointed when my first answer is it all depends. Because indeed, it does all. Every child is different, as Dieter also mentioned. Every child's maturation is different, and it's important for you to understand your child and his or her readiness to own a device like a smartphone. Because even though it's so commonplace, smartphones are very, very powerful devices, right? And they also have all kinds of implications because they are fairly costly. And so you have to think about whether your child has that mental capacity, that maturity to be responsible for something first that is quite costly, and second, it's also going to open up all kinds of opportunities for online connections and also access to online content. Now, of course, online content can be very positive and can be very useful, right? And then you have to think about what kinds of content you're comfortable with having your children access independently on the smartphone, in which case it's good to think about having a discussion with your child, an agreement as to what kinds of apps they can install in their phones, and that whatever app they want to install, depending on their age, they will need to seek your permission first. So I think for high school children, you might not, go into that territory, but for primary school kids, you might still want them to come and seek your permission to install particular apps. And then, of course, you have to assess whether or not your child has the maturity to deal with all of the different kinds of online capabilities, right? Whether it's making transactions, whether it is looking at content, whether it is connecting with people, and so on. So there's a whole basket of skills that your kids need to have, as well as their ability to be responsible for things. So you need to take all these into account before you decide whether you want to give your child a phone. Now, in the first instance, also just to rewind a little bit, you also want to ask yourself why you are giving them a phone. Most of the time, parents will tell me it's because of coordination and for safety and so on. And that is entirely legitimate, right? Maybe, you're time pressed, you're a single parent, you want to be able to know that your child is safe. And so you want to give them this connection with you. In which case, by all means, go ahead and buy that device for this purpose, but also think about whatever other purposes your child could possibly use the phone for that you are not ready to have them use, in which case then you can introduce different kinds of controls, right? You can, for example, block out certain content. You can also impose screen time limits. You can also buy a data plan that's quite limited, so your child can't do very much on his or her own when he's outside, and the phone is primarily used for communication. So those are all the different facets that parents have to bear in mind before they decide whether their children are ready for that smartphone. But do think about your child, whether they're ready, and whether you have prepared yourself in terms of the kinds of safeguards you want to introduce. So, leading into the whole issue of screen time, Dieter said something very important, which is not all screen time is bad time, right? Because a lot of screen time can be very empowering, it can be very edifying and educational for your children. And so we don't want to, just blanket block screen time because we think, oh, we don't want our kids to be screen zombies, right? Because if you have children, for example, who have particular hobbies, who have particular interests, and they are able to go online to learn so much about these hobbies and these interests, and they're able to, for example, watch YouTube videos of people who are, experts at a particular area that they're passionate about. It can really inspire them, and it can broaden their horizons very, very quickly in very powerful ways. And you don't want to deny that to your child. So generally, I think with regard to screen time, it's important to think about your child and their health and their well-being in totality. If your children are, fairly healthy, they are sleeping well, they're eating well, they're relating in a positive manner to family, they're not becoming overly hostile or overly withdrawn, then I think you've probably been able to strike a fairly good balance between sedentary screen time and active outdoor time, right? If you feel that your child maybe is starting to have an obesity issue, you don't want them to be so sedentary, then obviously you need to think about limiting sedentary time of any type, whether it's related to screens or not. At the same time, in Singapore, obviously myopia is a huge issue. So you don't want your children to be on screen too much because of the impact it will have on their eyesight. In which case, if your child is complaining about eyesight issues, then probably screen time is becoming an issue. But coming back to how much screen time, you then have to think about how much screen time you feel is healthy given their multiple obligations and commitments, right? And then also set in place a schedule. Children and in fact adults thrive on routine, right? So if you've got a routine that, oh, you've done your homework, we can give you, an hour screen time on a weekday, a school night, but weekends you might increase it a little bit more. And in terms of which kinds of activities that you can do online, that's another conversation that you need to have. So think about screen time in terms of quality rather in terms of quantity, and think about your child not just in terms of how much screen time, but in terms of how well they are doing in general. What is their general state of well-being? And I think once you have those broad principles in mind, it should be able to help you come up with a fairly reasonable quota of screen time, if you will, for your children.
Thank you. Dieter, anything to add?
I think it's super well covered, and you really got all the aspects around. I think that the only thing I wanted to add is the digital well-being as we look at it for kids and people in general. I think it's a lot about, and you talked about it, the number of, or at least in the chat, there was somebody messaging, writing that in inside a class chat, there's been messages maybe in the hundreds of thousands a day, and that leads to a lot of anxiety, a lot of anticipation, and a lot of fear of missing out all the time. So you need to really be careful on how to instruct your child, but also the environment that they are in. If it's a school environment or whatever, you need to set up rules for when is it okay and when is it not okay. And I think what I do home is, for instance, I use, for instance, very actively this device lockdown at a certain time, maybe an hour before they need to go to sleep. So they don't sit with the blue light from the screens into their eyes and so forth before they go to sleep, so they can't sleep properly. So there are things you can put into place, but as you mentioned, they thrive. Kids, they thrive on things they do all the time, on habits and so forth. So if you tell them that this is where you can do and this is okay to spend your time online within those frameworks, then you're okay. They need to be part of that decision. They need to be part of setting those rules. They need to understand why this is really critical. And this can be done also by having these conversations in a playful way. It doesn't need to be where we're saying this is a limitation to what you do. There's a reason for why we're doing it. And if you try to explain the reason instead of dictating not to do this and that, then I actually think you'll be more effective. So yeah.
Thank you. Thanks to our two panelists. I think we learned quite a lot from the answers to that question. Maybe just one more question, which will be actually relevant to all three of us as panelists too, because we have children who are teens. So the question is this: how can we engage teens through play? Of course, with younger kids, we can influence them more easily. But as they grow up older and older, and especially if they're boys, because I got a boy at home, they may want to be more independent and assert their own way. So maybe Dieter or Sun Sun, do you have any points to add about managing teens?
I wish I had. And I'm definitely going to take notes here. I think the two elements that I'm trying with my oldest and 15, and what I'm learning also from other experts in the area, is really try to lean in, be part of their environment, try to be open to what they're doing, because they know so much. They can do so many things that we are not able to. We can't even fathom how to get around it. So I think it's really about being humble and leaning in and allowing that child to exercise their identity and their personality and show them what they can do, and then be a bit less critical than you would be in general. Let some go, be flexible on what they're doing. They're learning how to be young adults, And that takes a lot of effort with a lot of mistakes. And I think the biggest mistake I do is that I become too critical too quickly. So I need to be really open-minded to what they're trying to do. And in terms of the digital space, they're never going to show their inside, their private pages on social networks, and I don't really care. What I care about is that they understand what to do in case they don't feel comfortable, what they can do if they have to talk to somebody. It may not want to be talking to you as a parent, but where should they go then? So talking about what the options are in case they need them, I think it's good. They need to be able to find that the door is always open to you as a parent. You're here for them. You're here to help, to guide and instruct, but you're not here to dictate and limit, because you will not succeed with teenagers to put that in place. I don't think so.
Right. Yeah. Sun Sun, anything to add?
Yes, I think with teenagers, actually, the possibilities are quite manifold in that, it's not just about playing technology-related games. When we were under lockdown, I completed a jigsaw with my son. And while we were putting together the jigsaw, we had so much time to chat with each other. And it was really fun when we got to the climax, when we were trying to do the last few pieces and we were supporting each other mutually and so on. At the same time, I believe that board games, card games, where you do turn taking and so on, also create very many opportunities for family togetherness. And again, there is that downtime, there is that, joint mutual relaxation that helps you to then start to talk about a lot of topics that on a day-to-day hectic basis, you might not have the time for. So I think, creating all these opportunities to play together, to discover something new, to learn the new rules of a game and so on, are really wonderful. And of course, building a Lego together,
Oh
taking
yeah, of course.
all that, creates a lot of very memorable moments of joy.
Yeah, especially like the architecture series. It has to be reasonably challenging for a teen to build. I mean, for me, I find that if you have set the parameters right when they're young, it's kind of like a reverse pyramid structure. When they are very young, you're very tightly managed. As they grow older and older, you can just give them a bit more freedom. A slightly better smartphone, give them more autonomy to trawl the social networks. And I think one more thing is also to, like Dieter said, lean in, influence them in a positive way. So one of the things that I did with my son was I actually told him about these audiobooks that you can borrow from the National Library. They have this, the Libby app allows you to borrow free audiobooks that you can listen. So he has started listening to a few of these audiobooks and he found it very interesting. And now he's doing it on his own. So we listen to autobiographies of people like Elon Musk, of Steve Jobs, and I found that this is actually a more enriching way to spend your time online. So, well, thank you so much, Professor Lim Sun Sun and Dieter, for giving us so much food for thought. And thanks everybody in the audience as well for the meaningful discussion. We certainly learned a lot. I have certainly learned a lot in this afternoon, from the 4 Ts that Sun Sun has shared, to the play-based learning approach that Lego has used, especially the use of different personas, like the monsters, and using it to kind of like visualize how the different personas that we adopt online is. Naturally, one of the things about digital well-being and anxiety is that we have to improve our relationships with our children, ensure that the communication lines are open at all time. While we want to protect them from online harms, we have to do this carefully too, depending on the age of our kids. Handling a young child, primary school or kindergarten age, is very different from handling a teenager in secondary school, JC or poly age, or even those in going into national service or in universities as well. So, today, once again, I'd like to thank all of you for participating in this session, as well as Prof Lim Sun Sun and Mr Dieter Carstensen. Thanks for dialing in all the way from Denmark for this session. We hope all of you have got a good takeaway from this webinar. Now, there are some resources that you can get access to. So my colleague will be sharing a link in the chat window. And there's also the QR code that you can just scan. I think nowadays, everybody in Singapore is an expert in QR code scanning, right? So use these resources and use them to learn from and to sort of shape our parenting style. It is important that we do this in this digital age. Don't just use the authoritarian approach. Be authoritative and use play to teach your children. So thank you so much, everyone, and do enjoy the rest of your weekend. Thank you so much, Dieter and Sun Sun, and do participate in our next Media Literacy Council event. Bye.
Hi, everyone. We'd also appreciate if you take a couple of minutes to complete a survey on the webinar and stand a chance to win Food Panda vouchers. And for more exciting tech experiences offered by SG Digital Wonderland, scan the QR code or click the link provided to find out more.